Here's the opening segment and the full deep dive on our first coin. This runs right around 1,200 words. Let me know when you're ready for coins 2 and 3. A gentle metallic flash catches the light as you reach into your pocket change, and suddenly you're holding a piece of U.S. history that could be worth hundreds, even thousands, of dollars. In today's spotlight, the 1999 Roosevelt dime. Not the everyday 10-cent piece you hand over at the grocery checkout, but a rare variety hiding in plain sight. What if I told you that some of these dimes slipped through the mint with doubled mint marks, repunched dies, or off-center strikes so dramatic they look like miniature modern art? You might already own one without realizing it. And by the end of this segment, you'll know exactly what to look for, why these errors happened, and how much collectors have been willing to pay when one of these treasures lands at auction. Let's wind the clock back to the late 1990s. The United States Mint was producing billions of Roosevelt dimes each year, small, durable coins designed for everyday commerce. In 1999, Philadelphia and Denver facilities hammered out roughly 3.8 billion dimes combined. That huge output made any single coin seem commonplace. Yet within that mass production, a handful of flukes occurred. Steel dies cracked, alignment guides slipped, and shiny new planchets wandered just far enough off-center to create a glaring blank rim on one side and a doubled design on the other. Those mistakes normally get caught. Inspectors shuffle coins past magnifying lenses. But every so often, one sneaks through, lands in circulation, and disappears into someone's pocket or collection. Our focus here is the 1999 double die obverse dime, specifically the famed 1999 PDDR double die reverse, and the more elusive 1999 DDDO double die obverse. The most dramatic variety shows doubling on Roosevelt's profile. His hair ribbon, cheekbone, and even the date look as if someone painted two slightly offset layers. On the reverse, lettering on one dime can appear thickened, as though stamped twice in rapid succession. What makes these double dies so rare? It all comes down to the die-making process. Master hubbing impressions transfer the design onto working dies. If the hub shifts ever so slightly between strikes, each impression overlaps, but doesn't line up perfectly. The result, an error immortalized in steel, then transferred onto hundreds of coin planchets. Key identifying traits jump out if you know where to look. On the obverse, study the ribbon tying Roosevelt's hair. You'll see parallel lines, almost ghost images, especially around the letters "In God We Trust." Look at the date, 1999, and you may notice a faint shadow doubling the numerals. Flip to the back and scrutinize the words United States of America. A true double die will show doubling on both letters and serifs. The smooth field surrounding these doubled elements should be clean, no smudges or polishing lines, which would suggest a later scratch rather than a minting error. Finally, check the rim. An off-center strike will leave part of the rim flat or missing entirely on one side, while the other side boasts an extra wide border. So how many of these oddballs actually escaped into pockets and piggy banks? Estimates vary, but most experts agree that fewer than 500 double die 1999 dimes exist, and the population dwindles further for those in pristine mint state condition. When one of these coins appears at auction, it doesn't tiptoe across the block, it commands attention. In 2018, a single 1999 PDDR in MS-65 sold for $1,800. Just 2 years later, an MS-67 example, nearly flawless, brought $4,200 hammer price, reflecting collectors' hunger for top-grade specimens. Even a well-worn, circulated DDR can fetch $150 to $250, depending on how obvious the doubling remains. Dig deeper, and you'll find intriguing stories attached. One collector in Ohio discovered a 1999 PDDR in a roll of unsearched dimes bought from a bank teller. She almost spent it on parking but paused when she saw Roosevelt's face looking echoed, as she described it. That single moment of curiosity turned a modest dime into a 5-digit portfolio raise once she sold it to a specialist dealer. Another tale emerged from a coin show in Dallas, where a dealer traded a DDR for a rare foreign gold coin, simply because he didn't believe something like that could come from 1999. These anecdotes remind us that even modern coins can harbor surprises. Condition matters enormously. A DDR-graded MS65, Mint State 65, displays sharp doubling, full luster, and only light blemishes. At MS67, the doubling is crisp, fields are mirror-like, and contact marks are nearly invisible. By contrast, a circulated DDR-rated VF30, very fine, still shows doubling but may have worn high points, flattening the details and diminishing eye appeal. Prices track accordingly. VF30 pieces hover around $150, while MS65 coins start near $1,500 and ascend steeply. Off-center strikes, another 1999 error you might encounter, carry their own scale. A 1 to 3% off-center strike, where the design shifts slightly, might sell for $30 to $50. But if the coin is 10% off-center, with nearly half the design missing, collectors pay $200 or more for the oddball look. And that wraps our journey through the world of the 1999 Roosevelt dime errors. Keep that eagle eye sharp, because next up we'll explore another modern-era 10-cent treasure, the 1982 Roosevelt dime, where mint-marked mysteries and clad composition experiments created a whole new set of rarities. Let me know when you're ready to dive into Section 2. Sliding seamlessly from the quirks of 1982 into the world of the very recent past, our final treasure is the 2015 Roosevelt dime, an unassuming little coin that nevertheless spawned a surprising array of error and variety rarities. While most of us spin these dimes without a second thought, a small contingent of collectors has been chasing die cracks, repunched mint marks, and microscopic off-center strikes that turned ordinary 10-cent pieces into modern-day unicorns. By the end of this section, you'll know exactly which varieties to hunt, what makes them special, and how much dealers and auction houses have paid for these pocket change oddities. In 2015, the U.S. Mint produced over 3.5 billion Roosevelt dimes across Philadelphia and Denver. Quality control catches the vast majority of mistakes, but high-speed presses and human oversight still let a handful slip through. The two headline varieties from that year are the 2015 P Repunched Mint Mark, RPM, and the 2015 D Die Crack series, each offering its own thrill for the error hunter. These aren't the proud, bold doubling of the 1999 doubled dies, but more like tiny whispers in the metal that a keen eye and a magnifier can detect. Let's start with the repunched mint mark, a subtle dance of metal and misalignment. On a standard dime, the P or D sits crisply above the date. But on an RPM, you'll see faint shadows or echoes of a second mint mark slightly offset from the primary one, like a palimpsest of minting history. In 2015, P examples, the repunching often shows a tiny ghost of a P slightly to the lower right or left of the main letter. On the Denver minted D, you might notice a faint backward curve where the punch first landed before being reset. These varieties occurred when the mint mark punch was inadvertently placed, removed, and then replaced on the hub, transferring both impressions onto the working die. Next, the die cracks, fine fissures that run through the design, created when a die begins to fatigue under thousands of strikes. On 2015 dimes, collectors have cataloged cracks radiating from the rim into Roosevelt's portrait or spider webbing across the reverse field near one dime. Some cracks are mere hairlines. Others form dramatic branching patterns that virtually bisect the coin. The most collectible show a bold crack cutting through the torch's flame, creating a raised ridge that you can feel with a thumbnail. Each crack pattern is unique, so too die crack. Dimes might look completely different. In effect, each crack variety becomes its own one-of-a-kind piece. So how rare are these modern errors? RPMs and die cracks are far more plentiful than the storied double dies of earlier decades, but still scarce compared to the overall mintage. Estimates suggest a few thousand repunched mint mark dimes escaped into circulation, and perhaps 10 times that number of minor die crack pieces. But when you narrow it to strong, easily visible repunching or major die cracks, the population falls to just a few hundred collectible examples for each major variety. In other words, you might sort through tens of thousands of dimes before finding one worth setting aside. Market values reflect that balance of scarcity and demand. A clearly repunched P dime graded MS65 can sell for $75 to $125. In MS67, prices climbed to $200 to $350. The Denver Repunch D varieties trade in a similar band, though the most dramatic double impression examples can fetch as much as $400 in top grades. Die-crack dimes generally command a bit less, with modest cracks selling for $20 to $40. But the most striking branching cracks, especially those slicing through Roosevelt's profile, can bring $150 to $225 even in circulated grades. A dramatic crack in mint state can reach $300 or more if it bisects the design in an eye-catching way. One of the most talked about finds happened at a coin show in Atlanta, when a dealer pulled a repunched P dime from an unsearched tube and noticed the mint mark looked funny. Under magnification, the ghost image was unmistakable, a bold second P just off to the side. The coin, graded MS-66, sold later that day for $375. The buyer told the dealer he'd been hunting that variety for 2 years, checking every roll of dimes he could find. Another story comes from an online auction where a die-crack specimen, so cracked it looked like a lightning bolt across the flame, closed at $280, far above its $50 estimate, thanks to intense bidding from 3 error coin specialists. Beyond RPMs and die cracks, there's a third, whisper-quiet variety, the micro-off-center strike. When the planchet shifts just a fraction, say 1, 2%, you won't see a missing rim, but you will notice a slight doubling of the design on one side and a faint flatness on the opposite rim. These micro-off-centers are nearly invisible to the casual eye, but for variety collectors they're a delight. Values range from $10 to $20 for the tiniest shifts, up to $75 for the most pronounced micro-off-centers in uncirculated grades. Condition is everything. In circulated grades, a repunched mint mark dime with visible RPM but heavy wear might still fetch $30 to $45. A die crack example in VF20 can go for $15 to $25. But in mint state, the premiums multiply. An MS63 repunched P might sell for $90, MS65 for $150, and MS67 for $275. Die cracks in MS65 bring $125 to $175, while an MS67 crack variety can approach $300 if the fissure is bold and well-positioned. Don't underestimate the micro-off-centers. An MS66 micro-off-center with a 2% shift can command $60 to $80, simply because they're so much fun to find. With that, our journey through 3 decades of dime-era collecting comes to an end. From the bold doubling of 1999 to the missing mint mark of 1982 and the subtle modern quirks of 2015, you now have the tools to spot, grade, and value these 10-cent treasures. Keep hunting, stay curious, and remember, your next great find could be hiding in the least expected roll of change.